Hello and welcome. I'm Peter, and we're here to make progress, not perfection. But on that way to progress, we're gonna have to learn about Poland. Did I say Poland? Whoops! I meant the Prime Minister of Poland, Lidia Sobieska. We're gonna go over her strengths, her weaknesses, punishment tools, key moves, and stances. This is gonna be more of an introductory guide, and I'm gonna try to cram as much as I possibly can in a limited time. So needless to say, some moves and things that you might think are important aren't gonna make this list. So let's go. First up is her strengths. Block punishment. Lidia has some of the most well-rounded block punishment in the game. She's got a complete punishment kit for standing and while standing. Because of her many forward advancing attacks and various combo routes, Lidia has above average wall carry. While it's no Lars or Julia levels of distance traveled, more often than not you'll still be able to reach the wall with Lidia. Combo damage. On top of getting good damage on block punishment, Lidia also happens to have above average combo damage. She isn't necessarily reliant on walls for her combo damage either. She does well with or without walls. Mix-ups. A few of Lidia's attacks on hit automatically transition her into one of her stances, allowing for a mix-up opportunity here. She also happens to have a full crouch mix between a launching mid or a knockdown low. Now on to the weaknesses. First up is linearity. Despite having great attacks, Lidia is extremely linear and weak to sidestep and sidewalks. Particularly, she's weak to sidewalk left and sidestep left. 90% of her attacks can be avoided with a good sidestep. Homing, or rather lack thereof. Coupled with having a very linear moveset, Lidia happens to have very lackluster homing attacks. Actually, she just happens to have one homing attack, and it's a high. Commitment. If you've got commitment issues, you're going to have a hard time with Lidia. She's the type of girl that rewards you for committing to her strings, but sometimes committing to those strings can have devastating results. Forced stances. Speaking about commitment, Lidia loves it when you use her attacks that transition her into her stances. In fact, she loves it so much that she forces you to go into some of her stances on hit. Certain attacks make you go into stance, and once you're there, you can't block, you can't sidestep, you can't duck, and you can't cancel the stances. All you can do is attack or go into another stance. Lows. To round out the last of her weaknesses, it's her low attacks. Generally speaking, Lidia's low pokes don't give very good frames on hit or are quite punishable on block. Her more rewarding low attacks, which she does have by the way, are either very punishable on block or are locked behind a stance of some sort. Moving on, we have block punishers, and first up is standing. At 10 frames, Lidia has two options, 1-2-2 and 2-4. 1-2-2 does 25 points of damage and transitions her into Catfoot Stance 2 on hit. 2-4 on the other hand does slightly less damage at 23, but doesn't force a stance and is completely safe on block with the second hit being a mid. Both are viable options, it really just depends on whether you want to enter a stance for a mix-up or not. For a rare 11 frame Punisher, Lidia actually has got back 1-2. This does respectable damage, gives very good frames on hit, and forces the opponent into crouch, effectively limiting their options. At 12 frames, Lidia has forward 2-4. This does good damage, knocks down out in the open, and at the wall is a full wall splat. For 13 frames, Lidia's got down forward 1-2. Strangely enough, It's quite weak for a 13 frame Punisher in terms of damage, but what it lacks in damage, it does make up for in terms of frames. On hit, you get a big whopping 8 frames on hit. 14 frames, the most accessible and easy to use Punisher is forward 1 plus 2, 3, 2, 1. This does 41 points of damage, which is pretty good, knocks down a normal hit, also pretty good, and has good range. Usually this will be your go-to option. Forward 2 is Lidia's niche 14 frame block Punisher. On hit, this does force Lidia into cat foot stance 1, setting up a good mix-up. Use this Punisher for attacks with heavy pushback when you're not in rage. And speaking about rage, right, when you're in rage, Rage Drive 1, forward 2 plus 3 is a 14 frame launcher. It does good range, comes out very quickly, and instant screws or a combo. On block, it puts her at a massive frames where nothing is guaranteed but allows plenty of frames to set up a cat foot 1 stance mix-up. It's the only attack also that on block allows Lidia to go into stance. At 15 frames, Lidia just has hop kick, up forward 4. The range is okay. On hit, the hop kick performs an instant screw, allowing Lidia to transition into cat foot 2. The combo she gets is slightly below average, or yeah, slightly below average. Nonetheless, it's a launcher. For minus 17, Lidia has 3-2. This is a heavy hitting 2-piece string. You can also use this as a very solid whiff Punisher, and the damage you get on it, it's pretty good. Lastly, at 20 frames, Lidia has forward 3. This is reserved for very minus on-block attacks, especially those with heavy pushback. Those attacks, forward 3, usually more or less will reach. For while standing at the 11 frame mark, Lidia has one of the best Punishers while standing forward 2. This is way above average for damage and for frames. While not a lot of characters in the game have a 12 frame Punisher from crouch, Lidia does, with the form of full crouch down forward 2. This attack does good damage, knocks down out in the open, and wall splats near the wall. At 13 frames, Lidia has while standing 1-4. Out in the open, it just knocks down, but at the wall, it wall splats into some good damage. For a rare 14 frame while standing Punisher, Lidia's got while standing 3-2. Out in the open, it really doesn't look like much. It does okay damage and knocks down and pushes back. However, at the wall, it's a murder weapon because it's a wall bounce. For a 15 frame while standing launcher, Lidia just has the run-of-the-mill 15 frame while standing launcher. While standing 2. Not much to say about this one. And for heavily minus on block low attacks, basically minus 23 frames or more, Lidia just has the universal delayed hop kick. Now, onto the key moves. Alright, now that we're on key moves, let's talk about Lidia's jab. This is a standard 10 frame jab, but what makes it outstanding is that its hitbox is lower than most. This is usually a good thing as it's less likely to get evaded. And since we're on the topic of jabs, it's not uncommon to see that the opponent tries to challenge after a jab is blocked or duck in anticipation of a high. This is where 1-1 comes into play. 1-1 is a high mid poke that counter hit launches on the second hit. If you find that the opponent is mashing after you throw out a 1 jab, take note and then consider using 1-1. Also, this is unsafe at minus 11 on block, but the risk to reward is completely in your favor. Now, next is Lidia's 1-2 string. This is a pretty standard 1-2 string. It jails on block or hit, and it's only minus 2 on block, so pretty good. This is going to be your fastest safe poke string, and it serves also as a scouting tool, since if you notice that the opponent is mashing after 1-2 on block, take note again and consider finishing the string with 1-2-4. If the 4 is a counter hit, then you're guaranteed a forward 3 as a follow-up. Moving on from the jabs, we have down forward 1. This is your fastest mid poke. Use it to check opponents, or if you suspect them of ducking, or if you need to shut down anyone sidestepping right. That's to say, it tracks to Lidia's left side. Now, what makes Lidia's down forward 1 interesting is that instead of being the standard -1 to -3 on block down forward 1, it's a whopping -5 on block. And instead of being the standard +4 to +7 on hit, it's only +2 on hit. So this is rather unorthodox. Most characters in the game, if they land a down forward 1 on hit, they can perform another down forward 1 that's uninterruptible. Lidia is not able to do this. Instead, Lidia's down forward 1 serves as a mind game because it has 2 extensions that serve to deter opponents and prevent them from mashing after blocking a down forward 1. And the extensions complement one another. Down forward 1-2 is a mid-high poke string that's only -3 on block and +8 on hit. Landing this gives you good momentum for offensive pressure. Being a mid-high poke string obviously can be ducked and punished based on a read. However, the next string here is going to dissuade opponents from doing so. Down forward 1-3 is a mid-mid counter hit string that's -13 on block. Knocks down on regular hit, wall splats near the wall, and launches if the second hit is a counter hit, obviously. Use this if you find the opponent trying to duck down forward 2-1, or if the opponent is just constantly mashing after you do a down forward 1 on block. Down forward 2. Unlike most characters in the game, Lidia does not have a launching down forward 2. Instead, she has a 15 frame mid-range poke that on block is -6 frames. This attack gives Lidia a massive +12 frames that transitions her into cat foot stance 2, allowing her for a whole slew of mix-up opportunities. On counter hit, Lidia knocks down, and this is guaranteed a cat foot stance 2 left jab follow-up. The best place to use this attack is really when you're at +7 or more frames. Here, most opponents will not be able to avoid down forward 2 as a check with lateral movement. Continuing on with the slower mid pokes, we have down forward 4. This is a mid-range poke that can also double as a keep out tool. On block, this attack is only -4, which means you can still sidestep or backdash afterwards, and on hit you're +4, meaning you could potentially frame trap your opponent with a down forward 1 if they try to press buttons. If you do find that the opponent is immediately pressing buttons after down forward 4 on block, then there are 2 strings that you can try to utilize. First up is down forward 4-2. This is a mid-high non-jailing string. On block, this gives Lidia just 1 frame, but on hit, it causes a knockdown where the opponent has to hold back or else you get a run up down 2. At the wall, it splats. Second is down forward 4-3. This is a mid-mid non-jailing string. On block, it's only -10, and on hit or counter hit, it just causes a tailspan animation, giving Lidia +8 frames and being able to frame trap the opponent. And again, at the wall, it splats. Speaking about walls, Lidia's wall game was severely weakened with patch 4.20. Previously, 4-3 was a moderately fast wall splatting mid that could low crush and was safe on block. Now it no longer wall splats, nor does it even knock down. As a result, the next best mid to probably use when your opponent's back is to the wall is forward 1+2. It kind of fills the role that forward 3 did previously, except that this move is -13 on block. Ideally, what you would do is bait the opponent into whiffing something and then wall splatting them with forward 2-4 as a whiff punisher, but if you want to force a 50-50, forward 1+2 is there. Now, for a low attack, Lidia just has her Hell Sweep, or rather I should call it Demo Man, down back 3-2. In order to get both hits of this string, down back 3 needs to be a clean hit, and what that normally means is you just need to be really close to your opponent. However, this clean hit range is pretty gigantic. At certain distances, yes, you can backdash away and avoid the clean hit, but at the wall, the opponent is unable to backdash away, and as a result, down back 3-2 now becomes a viable attack at the wall. Alrighty, so now that we've talked a little bit about what Lidia wants to do at the wall, let's talk about how to get the opponent to the wall. While running 1, this is a high +7 on block attack that guarantees on hit a forward 1+2. Use while running 1 as a way to gain access to massive plus frames, get in on the opponent, and push them to the wall. Just don't spam this move too much, as it is a high and it can be sidestepped as well. Now, if you do find that the opponent is attempting to duck your while running 1s quite a bit, then you can consider mixing it up with the next 2 options, forward 2 and forward 4. Forward 2, as I mentioned before, is a block punisher for Lidia, 14 frames, niche block punisher. But in this case, you can use it as a mix-up tool for while running 1. Note that afterwards, you are stuck in cat foot stance 1 if you do hit. Forward 4 is a mid roundhouse kick that's very similar to down forward 4 in terms of its animations. Now on block, it's only -3, and on hit, it's a big +7. Use this over forward 2 if you want good plus frames on hit, but you don't want to be left in stance. I should also caution that all 3 of these options, while running 1, forward 2, and forward 4, none of these moves track, and they are very linear. So don't get overly reliant on them. Sometimes movement is just the best way to get in on the opponent. Okay, moving right along, we have some of Lidia's low pokes. Overall, the low pokes that she has are pretty lackluster. They either don't give very much damage, don't give very many frames on hit, or are somewhat risky to use. But nonetheless, they still need to be utilized as they're part of her kit. First up is the universal down 4. This is by far the fastest low poke that Lidia has in her arsenal, and quite possibly the most unrewarding option. But use this attack to annoy the opponent, interrupt their pressure, and to crush high attacks. Next is down back 2. This is a fairly fast low still for Lidia and is almost completely identical to Dragunov's down 2, except for the frames, okay? On block, Lidia's down back 2 is -14 on block, meaning select characters in the roster can launch Punisher for this. On hit, it's -1 frame, and on counter hit, it's a massive +12 frames, but nothing is guaranteed here. Down back 2 is really good for tracking to both sides as well. So use this to prevent sidestepping, use this also to crush high attacks, and just to kind of annoy your opponent. To round out the last of Lidia's low pokes, we have down back 4. Since as we know, down back 2 can be somewhat risky to use in certain matchups, and down 4 barely gives any damage whatsoever, and both are negative frames on hit, we'll need down back 4. This is the slowest of her low pokes without going into stance, and this is the only plus on hit low that she has as well, giving only +1 frame. On counter hit though, it does give a guaranteed forward 3 as a follow-up. Most of Lidia's good counter hit launchers either involve a string or a stance, and Lidia's Magic 4 is no exception here. Remember when I said that you have to commit with Lidia? This is most evident in her Magic 4. By itself, Lidia's Magic 4 does not launch on counter hit. In fact, it's only +1 on counter hit. And on normal hit, it's only +1. You must commit to one of the strings that she has, 4-2 or 4-3. 4-2 is a non-jailing, high, safe on block string. On counter hit, you get a nice launch and you can combo from it, but be aware not to over abuse it as it can be ducked and punished. 4-3 is a non-jailing, high, mid, -10 on block attack. On counter hit, you get a post screw launcher that you can combo from. If you're looking to land a fast counter hit launcher, then these 2 strings are going to be your best options. But I should warn you, I think, in all honesty, Lidia's Magic 4 isn't all that great because of its lackluster speed at 13 frames, doesn't track, and you need to commit to one of these strings. When in crouch, Lidia gains access to a full crouch mix-up game. For a chunky hitting low attack, Lidia's got full crouch down forward 3. This attack is high risk, medium reward. On hit, this knocks the opponent down into a disadvantageous position. This is particularly good at the wall as a single iteration of full crouch down forward 3 results into another guaranteed full crouch down forward 3. For a complementary mid to this, you can use while standing 2. As we spoke before, this is Lidia's 15-frame while standing punisher, but in this case, you can use it as a mix-up tool, being only -12 on block, and granting a full launch on hit, risk-reward wise, that's not bad. Alright, so we've established that Lidia is super linear. Now, what can we do about that? Well, quite frankly, we only have one homing move, back 4. It's a high, safe on block, mid-range attack that gives +6 frames on hit. This is kind of underwhelming and underpowered, but better make the most of it because this is her only true homing attack. Outside of attacks that involve strings like 1-2-4-4 or 3-2 or down 3-1, or you get the idea, outside of strings basically, Lidia doesn't have too many single hitting attacks that are great on block, but she does have 3 attacks that I think are worth noting. First up is down 1. This is a slow mid hitting karate chop that on block gives Lidia 2 frames and forces the opponent into crouch. It's not amazing, but it's a couple of frames for her to work with. However, on hit or on counter hit, the frames change to a massive +8 frames and still forces crouch. Use this attack if you find that the opponent is hesitating or respecting you. Now next up is sidestep 2. This is a slow mid attacking elbow that's 0 on block, but it does force the opponent into crouch and grants a massive +5 frames and still forces crouch on hit. Lastly, on counter hit, it knocks down into a guaranteed down 2 for a follow-up. Use sidestep 2 in tandem with sidestep down back 3-2 to set up a 50-50 out of any sidesteps that you do. Down forward 4-4. This is a slow, high attack, but it's very, very nasty. On block, it's +6 and forces crouch, and leaves the opponent very close to Lidia. On hit or on counter hit, it grants Lidia a full combo that grants some pretty good damage with or without walls. Now that we've talked about the main key moves that Lidia has in her arsenal, let's talk about her stances, as they're very important to her game plan. Campfoot stance 1, which I'll be referring to as CFO from now on. This is the first of her stances, and you can manually enter it with forward 3+4. The only 2 attacks that she currently has that allows her into CFO are Rage Drive 1 on block and forward 4-2 on hit. The most common situation that you're going to find entering into this is forward 4-2 on hit, so let's focus here. After forward 4-2 connects on hit, Lidia's most rewarding option is CFO 4. This is a mid kick that forces crouch on block, and the opponent is at -8, giving Lidia, well, +8. On normal hit, this knocks down and guarantees a down 2 follow-up, and on counter hit, it's a full-on combo starter. That's pretty good. However, it loses to 2 things: 12 frame or faster attacks, and sidesteps. And that's where this next move is going to come into play. CFO 3. This is a high kick that has pretty good tracking to Lidia's left and her right. After forward 4-2, use CFO 3 to shut down any sidesteps or sidewalks that the opponent might do. And on normal hit or on counter hit, this attack is a combo starter because it performs an instant screw launcher. And on block, it's only -1, so really no big deal. But its main weakness is that it loses to 10 frame or faster attacks, and it can be ducked. So that's where the next move comes into play. CFO 2. This is a mid karate chop that deals with opponents who love to duck, who love to mash, and who love to step. On normal hit, it just gives Lidia some damage and +4 frames. Nothing really to write home about. However, it really shines as a counter hit launcher because it's a full crumple stun. And CFO 1. Now this is the last of her attacks out of CFO, and it's kind of a niche attack. It's a high karate chop that can be done after 4-4-2 to stop opponents from sidestepping and from mashing. On normal hit or on counter hit, it just knocks the opponent down, but on block it does give Lidia +4 frames. Out in the open, you can't really capitalize on the frames here because of the massive amount of pushback, but at the wall, this is actually worth considering as it does wall splat, and if blocked, the +4 frames can actually here be utilized to frame trap the opponent as the pushback is reduced. Moving on to the next stance, we have Heaven and Earth. This is a bit harder to gain access to as it's only accessible by first entering into CFO. When in CFO, press forward and then presto, you're in Heaven and Earth. Now, before moving on to the various attacks out of Heaven and Earth, I should warn that properly conditioning the opponent to respecting CFO is required. So use plenty of CFO 2 and CFO 1 before attempting Heaven and Earth, as button mashing will beat out Heaven and Earth stance attacks. Against extremely defensive players who turtle up a lot, Heaven and Earth 1+2 is a fantastic attack. It's a high attack that guard breaks and gives Lidia +14 frames to do whatever she can possibly fit in. Out in the open, the best option for damage is forward 1+2, 3-2-1. Or if you happen to have rage, forward 2+3, effectively turning this into a guard breaking launcher. At the wall, use forward 2-4 as it wall splats the opponent. On hit or counter hit, this knocks down into a guaranteed forward 1+2 as a follow-up. Another attack that's good against opponents who just hold their guard is Heaven and Earth 2. This is a chunky low that has built-in high crushing properties. On normal hit, this gives Lidia +4 frames and forces both her and the opponent into crouch. On counter hit, this thing turns into a launcher that unsuspectingly leads into some substantial damage. As you can probably guess, the main weakness that Heaven and Earth 1+2 and Heaven and Earth 2 share is that they can be ducked, or rather low blocking beats both of them. That's where Heaven and Earth 1 comes into play. This is a mid safe on block attack. On counter hit or normal hit, it grants a crumple stun that leads into some damage. Use this option if the opponent is ducking Heaven and Earth 1+2 and low blocking Heaven and Earth 2. Now we have Catfoot Stance 2, which I will be referring to as CFT. You can manually enter into this stance with back 3+4. The attacks currently that transition her into CFT are 1-2-2, down forward 2, and up forward 4. But for the purpose of stance pressure and bind games, we'll exclude up forward 4, as when you hit it, you just combo from it. Your fastest and safest option when in CFT is going to be CFT 2-3-1. This string is a safe on block, high, mid string. The full string is guaranteed if the second hit is a counter hit. Should the last hit land and the opponent is near a wall, well then it's a wall bounce, baby. Use CFT 2-3-1 against opponents who either are mashing on 1-2-2 on hit or down forward 2 on hit. Against players who are content on holding block against Lidia because they don't want to mash, then CFT 4-4 is a good option. This is a high crushing, low mid attack. Think of it as a high crushing hell sweep, if you will. The damage is good on the string, but if the first hit is blocked, it is a stagger. So now let's say that the opponent is willing to crouch guard because they're looking to block this attack. Well, when you enter into CFT, there are two options. CFT 1 and CFT 1+2 more or less serve the same purpose, to stop opponents from ducking us. On normal hit, CFT 1 and CFT 1+2 knock down, and on counter hit, CFT 1 and CFT 1+2 grant a hard knockdown with a guaranteed follow-up of forward 1+2. The main difference between these two attacks is that CFT 1 is slower, safe on block, and much easier to step in certain situations. CFT 2 is faster, -10 on block, and slightly harder to step for certain characters. To cover for this sidestepping weakness though, we've got CFT3. This is Lidia's tracking attack out of CFT. If you find your opponent sidestepping to avoid CFT1, or in some cases CFT1+2, use this attack. CFT3 is a high, safe on block, hook kick. On hit, this grants Lidia a massive plus 11 frames to set up momentum. On counter hit, she gets an instant screw combo starter. Our last stance is Pouncing Tiger, Stalking Wolf, abbreviated with the acronym TAW, T-A-W. Similar to how Heaven and Earth works, the only way to enter into TAW is through another stance. In this case, TAW is accessed by first entering into CFT, then pressing forward. Like Heaven and Earth, since it requires transitioning from another stance, TAW is best used after conditioning the opponent to respecting CFT. So use CFT 231, CFT 3, and CFT 1 to gain respect before going into TAW. To open up opponents who love to just hold their guard against Lidia, she has TAW 4. This is a fantastic low attack. It's only -12 on block, which means majority of the time if it gets blocked, you're just eating a while standing 4 as a punisher. On hit, it knocks down, guaranteeing a forward 4-3 as a follow-up, though the timing on this is very tight. And on counter hit, you get a full-on launcher with some good damage. As good as TAW 4 might seem, its main weakness is that it can just be low parried or ducked, right? And that's where the rest of the TAW attacks come into play. TAW 1. This is a chunky mid attack. On hit or counter hit, it doesn't exactly do anything special. You just knock the opponent away. However, at the wall, it does splat. Now, one of the best things about TAW 1 is that it is +6 on block and leaves the opponent close enough for a mix-up. Use this attack to gain access to plus frames or to check duckers. The primary weakness of TAW 1 is that it's slow, so it's better to go for a faster option like TAW 2. This is the fastest mid attack out of TAW, and it's completely safe on block. The price to pay for this kind of mid attack is that it really doesn't do much on hit or counter hit. It just flips the opponent over, gives you some damage, and knocks them down. It's low risk and kind of low reward, really. But one thing to note is that it does hit grounded opponents and it'll flip them over. Oh boy, this has been quite a long guide in terms of the length of the guide and also the period of time in which I worked on the guide. Just to give a little bit of background for those of you who are still watching this, it took me about a month and a half, 2 months to flush this whole entire guide out. And in the last week, midway through having finished the guide, they had the patch 4.20, which then set everything just back at least a week. So thank you guys for taking the time to watch this, and if you notice that in the guide some of the damage numbers are off, it's because I really didn't want to re-record and delay the video any longer. But in terms of the frame data, all of that information in the guide should be up to date to patch 4.20. With that, thank you for watching. See you next time, guys. Take care. Thanks for watching, guys, and joining me on this video. Also, thank you so much, patrons, for your ever so gracious support. Without you, this would have not have been possible. And if you're new here and you like what you see, consider subscribing and hitting that bell notification icon. Below in the descriptions, as always, I also have my links to my Discord, Twitter, Twitch, and Patreon page. See you next time.